Hello, my name is Elijah Burwell, and this is my final movie review. And I used the movie Selma, which is directed by Ava DuVernay, and it's a movie about Martin Luther King, one of his marches to get voting rights. The main characters in this movie were Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. himself, Coretta Scott King, President Johnson, Jim Clark, George Wallace, Annie Cooper, John Lewis, Amelia Boynton, Jimmy Jackson, and Malcolm X, all who played a pivotal role in this movie and in real life. To summarize the movie was essentially about Dr. Martin Luther King's march to secure voting rights for African Americans in 1965. He was met with a lot of violence and met with a lot of figures like Jimmy Jackson and John Lewis. Jim Clark actually got punched by Annie Cooper. Martin Luther King was never violent, but he was arrested despite committing no crimes other than fighting for civil rights. The next major march was led by Governor Wallace, which used force and killed Jimmy Jackson. Many were injured and beaten in general. It was pretty brutal to watch, even on a movie. To think, I'm sure the real thing was much worse. The next march included John Lewis and Amelia on the bridge, and that was one of the more violent ones in broad daylight, where they used actual tear gas and intimidation tactics. John Lewis was injured during this, but because of this, on the next march on the bridge, white activists actually joined hands with the Martin Luther King, and the troopers actually allowed them to go through. Eventually, on the on that march, Lyndon B. Johnson actually allowed voting rights in 1965 and passed an act for that. So my sources were where I watched it on Pluto TV. Used IMDb for a bit of research and a couple other small articles like on American Spaces, a government website, and then just a regular website, Logos Journal. I picked 20 big concepts I thought were pretty integral. It's hard to pick which ones were the top ones. It was an easy decision to make for the future writing. Um, I think that obviously voter suppression and then the psychological torment from martyrdom and the generational trauma are some of the big ones that I think were some of the biggest issues. Um, Five major social issues I chose were voter suppression, state-sanctioned violence, state surveillance, factional infighting, and jurisdictional warfare. Voter suppression was the overall theme of the movie itself. We can even see that in the beginning. Annie Cooper is denied the right to vote. State-sanctioned violence, you can see on the bridge. They were beaten. State surveillance, the FBI was shadowing Dr. King's movements. And then even within the own factions, the SCLC and the SNCC disagreed and even wouldn't even march with each other at certain points. And then the jurisdictional warfare, the president passed laws to prevent voter suppression, but the state authority would not actually listen to it. In real life approaches for voter suppression, we have that today with strict voter ID laws, state-sanctioned violence. We've seen in ICE operations over excessive force against citizens. State surveillance, the Patriot Act today, is spying on its citizens, which is very controversial. Today, even BLM has infighting, where some people argue, should we use violence or peace? Jurisdictional warfare, we see in Minnesota the governor and the president fighting. In nonverbal communication, one of the things was the troopers lining up and intimidating, using the word gas masks and lining up. That was very intimidating. And then the way Martin Luther King talked